Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we're talking about The Bad Batch Episode 9 with Riki and Sarah Hayashi. All that and more after a commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back. I'm Matthew, your host. And for those of you who've been fans of the podcast for a while, you should know that Riki and Sarah Hayashi have been very regular guests. They were co-hosts with me on the all the episodes about the Clone Wars, as well as popping into some of the movie podcasts and things like that. We wanted to get them on to get their take on Bad Batch so far, especially as Riki just mentioned to me, this is basically, Clone Wars Season 8. So I'm really excited to have you all back. How are you guys doing today?
Yeah, we're doing pretty good.
Fantastic.
Nice.
How are you?
Not bad, not bad. Like I said, I'm enjoying this break because otherwise today is a day of landscaping work. So this is a nice little excuse to take a break from that. Well, and so let's kind of jump right in. I know I've been chatting a little bit with you all off air, but this is my first time having you on the podcast to talk about the Bad Batch. I think, Sarah, you were on one or two of the earlier episodes, I think.
I think episode 3 I was on one, but yeah.
That sounds right, yeah. And Riki, we haven't had you on at all. So for both of you, how are you liking the show so far? What are kind of your overall thoughts?
Well, like I said, it's basically Clone Wars Season 8, and I enjoyed that series, especially towards the end. So really enjoying this. This is my favorite period of kind of extended Star Wars media stuff, like in between the movie series where we really get to find out more about how the Empire was created or how it established itself in the galaxy and became the juggernaut that it does at the beginning of A New Hope. So
right.
There's been some of that, maybe not enough for my taste, but I'm sure we'll get more. And like going forward in terms of Star Wars media, I think we're going to get a lot more of this, and I'm really just looking forward to absorbing it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like it. I don't know if I love it, but I'm still every Friday. I'm definitely looking forward to watching it. I think I'd place it somewhere between Mandalorian Season 1 and Season 2, where I like it more than Season 2, but not as much as Season 1, and not as much as Rebels, but maybe more than the earlier seasons of Clone Wars.
Right, that makes sense. I feel like I'm in kind of a similar place where. Riki, I definitely agree with you. This is such an interesting time, and we actually were talking on a recent episode about how I kind of wish that we were getting a little bit more of the Empire stuff. I'm so fascinated by this story of Tarkin and Crosshair and the decision to move away from clone troops to using regular troops, and I want to see more of that. But I've really loved getting to see, the way that people on all these far-flung planets are thinking of, the Empire is, taking care of us. They're dealing with all the chaos. This is good. I think it's very easy to see when I'm 5 years old and I'm watching Star Wars, the idea of this galactic empire that just rules everyone by, utter fear and intimidation. It's of course that makes sense. I kind of feel like as I've gotten older, I've had to more understand that even things like that, you need to have some people who genuinely think, often because they're deluded or because they've gone through so much fear or whatever it is, that this is what they want, even if they later realize differently. And in some ways, to me, that makes it even more terrifying, watching these, when we know what the Empire is going to become, watching people get excited about, we get new credits. This is all so wonderful. We get Law and Order. This is great.
And this is also, we get to see the kind of third faction of Star Wars, as it's often called, the scum and villainy faction.
Yep. And
how it is, during the Republic era, they were definitely the bad guys because the Republic, shouldn't deal with people like that. But here we see, the Bad Batch not only deals with them, but joins them in a way. And I think we are going to see more of how that faction aligns with what is going to become the Rebel Alliance.
Right. That's a story I want to hear more of. I made a joke in a recent episode that under the Republic, it was kind of Gotham, and that the Cad Banes and the Hondos, they were the bad guys, but they also could do almost anything they wanted because the enforcement was fairly lax. I'm curious to see if we're going to get more stories about the Empire kind of cracking down on some of that. And that maybe, as you're saying, kind of making people be like, yeah, I don't like this Empire. What's this rebellion thing? Let's talk to them.
Yeah. I like that we've seen like Cad Bane. I hope we get to see Hondo. But it's interesting to see the shift from going from Clone Wars, where they were not directly but indirectly sort of puppeted by Palpatine. At the very least, like, Palpatine had them kind of in line, sort of knew what was up with the bounty hunters, to now where, like, does Tarkin know what's going on with them? I mean, like, it seems not, right? Like, he's got the Kaminoans underneath him hiring out bounty hunters. So, yeah. Interesting shift.
Yeah. I think the other thing I've been really enjoying about this, and we got something in this episode that kind of even drove this home, which I really appreciated, which we'll get to, but I feel like I think the three of us talked about this a lot, that during the Clone Wars, some of our favorite episodes were where the Jedi were in the background, where the clones really got to do clone things, because it's very easy once, you know, the super powerful space wizard with a laser sword shows up, you know, what the clones are doing seems kind of irrelevant. And I'm really, and I think very much like The Mandalorian, I'm really enjoying that we don't have super powerful Jedi, you know, running around and kind of taking up all the oxygen in the room. Like, seeing the story about just these clones having to do what they do with the limitations they have, even though they're super badass, I'm just finding it a really compelling story.
Yeah, especially, like, Vader has been very much put into the background. You know, Tarkin, well, Vader and the Emperor, and Tarkin is the primary villain of this piece. And so you all in the previous episode talked a little bit about Inquisitors and whether they might show up and, like, when they're established. I actually read the comic book that establishes, like, when and how the Inquisitors were created.
Oh, cool. Yeah, please tell us.
It's very odd. Like, I don't know if I buy into this timeline, but basically after Darth Vader becomes Vader, you know, the mechanical body and the whole he goes out on a quest to create his new Sith lightsaber. And then when he comes back from that quest, the Emperor is like, now that you have your lightsaber, I want to show you something. Here are the Inquisitors. So it's like Vader has no real hand in their creation at all. And it's the Emperor. And it seems like timeline-wise, he would have had to have been already doing this prior to basically Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, and, like, when Riki told me about this, we kind of had a little chat, and I was wondering if maybe originally the Emperor had planned for Vader to be an Inquisitor first and then kind of promote him up, but with, like, the death of Dooku, like, scooted him up into, like, the second-hand position quicker. But
yeah, that's interesting, and that is, as you said, Riki, I think we're going to get a lot more stories in this time period. I would love to get another story that's about that, because to me that has so many interesting implications, both for, you know, what does that mean for the rule of two, that they are training other Force users in the dark side, but that they're not officially Sith, and how do they draw that line? As well as just, you know, obviously a later part of the story when we get to the original movies is this whole question of, like, recruiting Luke to join them, and the question that, you know, Vader coming to, you know, think, like, does Luke join me so that we can overthrow the Emperor and keep the rule of two? Is the Emperor wanting Luke to take Vader's place? Like, there's just so much interesting stuff there based around, can there only be two? And if we do have this idea that there can be Inquisitors, you sort of wonder, like, okay, well, actually, how does that affect everything for the, you know, New Hope storyline? But also, why weren't there Inquisitors running around by the time of New Hope? You know, why did that program go wrong? To me, there's just so much interesting stuff there that I'd love to. I know I just said I like stories about non-Force users, but that I think would also make for really rich storytelling.
Yeah, and the Inquisitors are sort of like an interesting, like, sub aspect of Force users, I guess, as well.
It fills in some gaps in terms of, like, were all the Jedi wiped out? The answer is no, and, like, did some of them turn to the dark side? The answer is yes. And exploring that nuance, I think there are interesting stories to tell. And it could also establish, like you said, a better rule set for what it means to be a Sith, as opposed to a, you know, dark Jedi or a dark, you know, Force user.
Right.
So I think if they are able to establish, like, a rule set of beliefs and or powers that specifically Sith have, that could help to, you know, fix some of these problems we have with the rule of two.
Right. Yeah, I think that could be really interesting. Or that could be something about like that the Inquisitors is something they kind of try and then realize like isn't working. And that's why they kind of go back to it being just the rule of two by the time of the new movies. As well as the fact of, from everything I know about the Sith, being confused that they're not like legalistically exactly following their rule is kind of the whole point of the Sith, is that they don't do that. So like the idea of the rule of two being something that's kind of observed in the breach, but actually people are breaking it right, left, and center. I mean, I think that's also an interesting way that the story can go.
Yeah, and like I kind of thought we were gonna get Inquisitors in, episodes like 7 and 8 when they the batch were on Braca, because that's the planet from Fallen Order where we see some Inquisitors show up. Obviously later than this, but not much later, right. 5 years ish. But then then we got Cad Bane swooping in and running off to a different planet. So kind of pulled away from that. But I do like that. Well, at least one of the bounty hunters from Clone Wars and then another one from Mandalorian are making an appearance.
Definitely.
Yeah. So let's actually talk about the episode in question.
Please. Yeah. So what'd you think of this episode overall?
This is fantastic. I keep using that word, but this was probably my favorite episode so far of the Bad Batch, so I'm glad that I get to be here to talk about it.
Yeah.
It establishes like so much more of the bigger universe like we're talking about of scum and villainy, getting to see Cad Bane doing this thing again, even though what's up with his hat?
It's slightly smaller, right? And I'm very upset. I'm an inverse proportion of upset to how much his hat has shrunk.
I mean, fashion changes over the years. We've had like 15 years since we saw him in... Actually, no, it's not been that long. But, it's actually much shorter than that.
Yeah.
But, still, fashion changes. He's on the run. Maybe he got a new kind of hat.
Yeah, and we did see some episodes in Clone Wars of him trying on a variety of hats. But yeah, when we... last episode, when we first got that shot of him, I was like, your hat is not big enough, sir.
I think one of the things I liked most about this episode, there was so much I did, but is that there's a trend that we see a lot. I'm actually going to talk about this in the TV show Loki later tonight when I record on that on Sunday night, although I think this episode may go up Monday. WandaVision did this. A lot of things did this trend of when you have a bad person, but you want to show that they're not as bad, you have them fight someone worse. And there's a part of me, like, I got spoiled that Fennec Shand was going to be in this. Because actually I actually didn't see this episode until this morning because I had just a lot going on. But, so I got spoiled that Fennec Shand was in it. And at first I was like, are they going to try and make Fennec Shand kind of the good person because she's not as bad as Bane and she's kind of helping? And so the fact that she showed up and the first thing she did was kill the Kaminoan, who, granted, is not a good person by any means, but it really kind of emphasized for me, like, this isn't Fennec Shand wanting to help Omega because she's sort of feeling all these good feelings. This is just two bounty hunters who are both out for a good payday, both trying to get paid and fighting with each other. And I just really appreciated that because it felt much more true to this world of scum and villainy rather than having one of them all of a sudden, have this hero turn and have the heart of gold or some nonsense like that.
Oh, see, I don't know. I thought that, like, she did in a way. Like, I mean, it could have just been her trying to get Omega to come with her, but like saying, I'm looking out for you. I genuinely want, like, I'm trying to help you here. Like, I believe that's what she was doing, and yeah, like she's doing it for a paycheck. But like we know that later she like meets up with Boba Fett,
right?
Who is another one of these like pure clones of Jango Fett. So I don't know, like I do think she's got some redeemability about her.
Well, she's just, like you said, she's just in it for the payday, but the origin of that payday is see, I've already forgotten the names. Nala Se, right? Yeah. The scientist, the female Kaminoan scientist, who her motivations are to save Omega's life,
right,
and keep her away from Kaminoa, because the Prime Minister Lama Su just wants her genetic material and to get rid of her. So Nala Se actually cares about Omega as a person,
right? Definitely.
And so that's translating to Fennec Shand's motivations to keep her alive.
And that was one thing I wasn't quite clear on. Nala, the Kaminoan who was killed by Fennec Shand is a third person, right? It wasn't either Prime Minister or the one who's trying to keep Omega alive.
Yeah, it's Ton Wei, a third Kaminoan, yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Right, because Lama Su is maybe getting suspicious of Nala Se's motivations. So when she volunteers to take the payment, he's like, no, I'm going to send this other person to redshirt it up.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and I have to say that reveal also I absolutely loved in terms of why the Kaminoans wanted Omega, because I don't know what you all had thought. I hadn't really known what Omega was. There's a lot of theories going around. But one of the theories I know that had been going around was that this was like an early Palpatine clone or early attempt at cloning Force-sensitive people or something like that. And I found I really didn't like that, in part because of all the stuff we're talking about this not, or that at least I've been talking about this not being all about Force users. Did you have any of that same kind of thing of I want to know more about Omega, but I felt really happy knowing that the reason they want Omega is because of her having kind of the original genetic material and they want to be able to make new clones again, rather than it being her being this, super duper clone that they want to keep, or her being a Force sensitive clone or something like that. What'd you all think of that reveal?
Yeah, so I always thought that she was a Jango clone of some sort. I thought she maybe had been modified in some way. I wasn't super comfy with her being like the pure form of Jango, because it felt like there's something a little icky feeling about like the light-skinned blonde-haired girl being the purest form.
Yeah, that's been commented by a couple people online. I think it's very true.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, it fits with the general trope of her being like the special one that we get with kids. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I was hoping for something a little more like different about her. I don't know. Like, they had done some modifications to her. Like, they'd used some of the mutations from the Bad Batch and like put them all into Omega or something like that.
Right. Yeah, well, go ahead.
They haven't really established why Jango Fett's genetic material is so important. Right? Like, okay, he's the origin of all of the clone soldiers.
Right.
But why does that matter, right? Like, the idea of cloning technology is that you take one person and you clone them and make hundreds or millions of them. But why is Jango Fett so important in this process? Like, he was like chosen because of his combat ability and physical prowess, right? To be this soldier prototype. But they've established that the Empire wants to shut down this program. So you aren't going to necessarily be producing more clones, unless that is the plan. Unless maybe they need the pure clone material to produce a new army to have some kind of rebellion attempt.
I think it's the opposite. Like, the material that the Kaminoans have is degenerating, so you can't like clone clones from other clones. Sentence. But I think they want to get rid of like Boba and Omega because they are like the purest form, so that way they can't start up another, like nobody else could start up another clone army if they axe Omega and Boba Fett.
Yes, go ahead.
The whole reason the Kaminoans do this is business, right? Like, they are in the business of selling clones. So if your primary customer is like, we don't want these clones anymore, why do you need that specific clone material for the thing that is no longer a wanted product?
Yeah, you're like breaking the molds that nobody else can start selling them off to undercut you.
I actually had a fairly different take. What I thought was happening, and this is also where I wish we were getting more of the Tarkin discussions about, because we saw them use regular soldiers instead of clones, and the regular soldiers disobeyed, and Tarkin was obviously frustrated with that. And maybe I'm headcanoning here, I'm not sure, but the way I read that was that at this point in the story, the Empire and Tarkin are still not sure what they want to do, and the Prime Minister still thinks there's hope of convincing the Empire to continue to basically buy a whole new clone army. And so that's why they want the material to be able to be like, we want to make our best pitch. Like, we want to keep your business. And because I certainly know, I think this was briefly mentioned in the Clone Wars, but I know it was also mentioned in some of the Legends novels, particularly I believe Republic Commando, which are not canon, but which many of the ideas of which have clearly been kind of carried over, as well as in some of the other Legends canons. Yeah, that like the further away from the original source you get, it's like making a copy of a copy of a copy. It's going to degrade. It did seem, I did have a little weirdness of like, isn't there some other like really good soldier? Like Jango Fett's not like the 1 in 10 billion. You could find some other really great athletic person.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's
but then they don't all look the same.
That's my point, is that you could have like Fennec Shand be the prototype of a new clone army in theory. Yeah. So I think maybe what's missing for me is part of Tarkin's motivation for discontinuing the clone program, like having some line about, well, like the newer clones are degenerating at a faster rate, so we don't want to pay you for these anymore.
Oh, yeah. I think that could help.
Yeah, I do. I just, in general, wish that we had, like what you guys have been saying already, wish that we had more Tarkin interaction. Because I think that also meant that we would hopefully get more Crosshair, who I think we've been woefully lacking so far in this series. But yeah, it is. I'm sure they'll. Well, I'm not sure that. I hope that they will like clear this up and come with some reasoning. But yeah, I like the idea of making the pitch, because they don't just want Omega's genetic material. They want all of Omega alive. So yeah, they clearly have some sort of plan with her that is more than just let's take a blood sample. And
didn't the Prime Minister say? The Prime Minister, I thought, said get the genetic material and then terminate her.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's what Lama Su wants.
But Cad Bane said something about like you're lucky they want you alive
until they can extract the genetic material.
Gotcha.
So somehow science, technobabble. If she shows up dead at Kaminoa, like it's too late.
I see. Okay,
right.
That makes sense.
Which also kind of raises questions about how what they say of Palpatine was close, but I don't want to get into the science of that because it just makes no sense. But yeah,
science.
Yeah, exactly. I've got enough science technobabble to figure out time travel on Loki to worry too much about it here.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Well, and so on that same subject though, so we went into a room that they said was like an abandoned facility of the Kaminoans, which was surprising because it clearly had a lot of like cloning technology happening, and had, I guess they were kind of defective clones. What did you see? Because what I thought I saw was one clone that looked very much like a Kaminoan, and that's the one that kind of fell on Fennec Shand. It could be a Kaminoan. It could be kind of like a generic. Like, it looked kind of like the green wide-eyed Martian from like Aliens Are Watching Us kind of stuff of like the 80s and 90s. But then I thought a different clone that we didn't never crashed out of the tube, that looked to me kind of like something that could evolve into what we knew as Snoke. What did you all see in the clones there? What did you think there?
Supreme Leader Snoke confirmed.
Yeah, so they go to the planet Boravio, which is this
it's a different
planet.
Right.
Separate cloning facility, which again, seems like, I don't know, they're downsizing. It's weird. But yeah, they didn't go and take all their stuff. They just kind of left it lying around. I didn't think too much about the beings in the tubes, other than that's creepy, and then it fell on Fennec Shand. That's extra creepy and kind of gross.
Yeah, I thought that the body that fell out did look vaguely Kaminoan, although maybe the neck wasn't quite long enough.
Right.
And maybe that is a hint as to their origins, right? Their race themselves is derived from cloning technology somehow.
Oh, that could be it.
And that could point to their motivation for wanting this pure genetic material.
Right.
Maybe somehow Jango Fett's genetic material made it more ideal for cloning in general, not just because he was an excellent soldier.
Right.
So what if they need her material to continue to perpetuate their own race through cloning technology?
It could be that they're clones, or it could be the opposite of that. They're not clones, but they've realized that they can't clone themselves. That some of their early attempts were to clone other Kaminoans, and that didn't work for some reason. I mean, there's so many different directions that could go.
These were clearly failed cloning experiments. So, I mean, either they were like early attempts and they hadn't perfected the cloning techniques yet, or like you guys are saying, there is something like you require a certain type of DNA to do it to make sense.
That could also point to why Nala Se is so personally committed to Omega's safety. Maybe she has somehow infused her own genetic material into her, and she's some kind of hybrid.
Ooh,
so she's more like an actual daughter.
Yeah. Which would, I mean, not that a Kaminoan looks blonde and fair-skinned, but would also at least maybe give a little more explanation why a clone theoretically that's like, you know, directly from Jango Fett looks so different than Jango Fett.
Yeah.
That would, yeah. I'm excited to see where this goes, especially because we were kind of saying with the Inquisitors that one of the I like so much about the prequels and so much about the Clone Wars and things like that. But to me, it's the problem with any prequel is once you start introducing a lot of these things, one of the first questions is, well, where are they by the time you get to the next set of movies 20 years later? And in the same way that I've always kind of wondered, if we have Inquisitors, why aren't they still running around by A New Hope? You do kind of wonder, why aren't people using clone soldiers anymore? And I think it's one of the reasons why I want to see this Tarkin story is I want to, you know, why isn't the Republic using them to like generate more soldiers? Why isn't the Rebellion, since the Republic did? So I would hope that either by the end of this or by the end of some other story, we get some reason why like all sides have kind of agreed like we're not going to do any more cloning for a while. Because it certainly seems like, especially the way they talk about it in A New Hope, that cloning is very much a thing of the past that doesn't happen anymore. So I'd love it if this story, or maybe what the story is leading to, you know, just kind of answers that question a little more.
That was something that the Legends canon did establish in a better way, I felt, was that the Clone Wars themselves were normal people fighting against clones.
Right. Because
the clones had gone crazy, like as a race. Had kind of lost it and had become super violent. And that's why they had to have these wars, and that's why there aren't any clones anymore.
Right.
I mean, a thing that we talked about during the Clone Wars series a lot was this idea of like clones as commodities, especially with the Kaminoans pushing for the Empire to buy. It wasn't the Empire, the Republic, to buy more clones, like as though they were tanks or stock or equipment. So I could see the Rebellion not using clones from this sort of moral standpoint of like, you know, they're living beings. We don't want to breed people for this. But yeah, I think getting some more information on why Tarkin is also like pulling the Empire away from this.
That actually supposed to make sense, because I'm going to say this as vaguely as I can to not give spoilers. But we saw in Rebels that some of the people who were early involved in the forming of the rebellion were folks who were very uncomfortable with clone soldiers towards the last years of the Clone Wars. So I think that's actually a really good theory, Sarah. The other thing I've been thinking about is, you know, we talked all the time about the interaction between the clones and the Jedi. And I've always kind of wondered if maybe another reason why the clone... I think kind of the Timothy Zahn books kind of established this idea, is that to some level, like, you need Jedi, you need Force users to lead the clones. You know, granted, the TV shows and the movies had a very different impression of clones than the Timothy Zahn books did, because these are much more like individualistic with sentience in ways I don't think some of the Legends books had. But I do think that's another interesting thing of like maybe they realized that with the Bad Batch are kind of this weird thing, but with how conditioned they are, especially maybe after the chip, that they realize like without Force using leadership, the clones don't work. And that could be another reason why they all kind of gave up on them.
Yeah, so this was basically a theory that Force users could create like a collective consciousness between troops, and because the clones were all the same, it made it easier to connect them all together via the Force.
Yeah.
And I actually like the way that he wrote that, especially how it kind of explains the Battle of Endor, that when the Emperor died on the Death Star, like all of the Imperial troops like lost that connection, and that's why they became so scattered and couldn't beat the rebels, even though they had overwhelming military strength still.
Yeah, since there were still like 100 Death Stars against maybe 30 Republic cruisers, like that part of the battle was never shown.
Yeah.
And, like, the whole rest of the galaxy just decided, like, oh, Empire's over. We all got the memo.
Yeah, just like they all kind of like lost the will to fight because the Emperor was providing that will through the dark side.
Yeah. And I guess, like, the whole galaxy thing is a new release, Lucas edition. It was just like Endor yub-nubbing it up in the original, right?
Yes, the celebration makes no sense.
Yub-nub, yub-nub now, yub-nub tomorrow, yub-nub forever. You know,
right.
like I am. I'm referencing a segregationist phrase, and I'm trying to reclaim it. But my apologies for that phrase used. But like, yes, always yub-nub.
But yes, Yusa are not free just because the Emperor died one day ago.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
We actually did a great episode a while ago with Becky Allen. And they had some really great things to say about the whole great man of history idea and how, like, you know, in our own world, we're often showing that, like, it's not like great men, you know, that movements often start without just one person. And I've often thought there's kind of a villain corollary to it, both in fiction, but also in our own real world. You know, it's like, let's get rid of Jeff Bezos and everything will be great. You know, no, there's a vice president of Amazon who's going to do the exact same thing. You know, get rid of the emperor and there's probably some other, you know, second in command who's going to do the same thing. It was one of the things I was so most excited. I've talked about this before, so I won't go into it more, but like that I was so excited for The Force Awakens was to get more of that story of, okay, the Emperor's dead, the Republic is taking over, but what are all the problems of the Republic taking over? Because it's not easy to just snap your fingers, kill one person, and everything goes back to normal. But of course,
like there's so many examples in history of like toppling dictators and then just creating power vacuums and not actually like dismantling those systems. Yeah.
I might suggest a moment in fairly recent history of a fairly awful leader being removed from office, but things not getting magically better. Any random thing. I'm not referring to anything specific, of course. But let's get back to the actual episode. So we talked about Omega and that whole storyline and the Fennec Shand of it all. For you all, especially as my folks who were talking, I was talking all through the Clone Wars, how have you felt both last episode and this episode about Cad Bane being back? Other than his hat. He needs a bigger hat, we get that. But beyond that, how do we like the Cad Bane Western of it all?
So good.
His voice feels different.
Yeah.
And that could just be the actor aging.
Right. Yeah, after the previous episode, I looked it up and I was like, they got a different voice actor, but it's the same guy.
Yeah,
and he sounded more
Cad
Bane-y this episode than previous.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't the most thrilled that Toto is still palling around with him.
Mm-hmm. Poor Toto.
Well,
this is the Cad Bane's companion droid.
Yeah, who just like takes a lot of abuse from Cad Bane and kind of acts like comic relief, but not I don't know, not in a charming or fun way, mostly just in an annoying way, in my opinion. Yeah,
this has been a long-going trope for these characters. Cad Bane literally blew Toto up in maybe his first episode, right? Like just rigged him with explosives and blew him up as a distraction to get away. And then I guess has rebuilt or has a different model programmed in the same way.
Yeah, I had a lot of rough feelings about that. I mean, because I'm, you know, an amputee who's lost my leg, and so some of that stuff kind of hit home in some odd ways. Though I thought they did it in a nice way of like, especially the whole like let me do it myself kind of thing. That was something I actually kind of really related to for a moment there. And it's funny because we talked a lot during the Clone Wars about how the droids were often treated terribly, but in a way where we, the audience, were not supposed to have any sympathy for them. We were just supposed to think their suffering was hilarious. Now they're trying to show us their suffering and have us be sympathetic to their suffering, but nothing's getting any better for them. And I'm sort of like, I know I wanted this, but this is worse in some ways. I definitely really hoped there was going to be a moment where Omega sort of helped Toto to see that this is not a good situation, and then Toto kind of wanted to help Omega. And granted, Toto was like touched by Omega in terms of like her caring for him, even though she also like, you know, then used him to get away herself. But when Toto was just still so loyal to Cad Bane, I was like, this is just like, I get breaking cycles of abuse is hard, but this is hard to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would have loved Omega acting as like his savior in that role either. Like, I don't know if that would have been worlds better. But yeah, I just Toto is so clearly mistreated, but he's also like not. I don't know. I didn't find him extraordinarily sympathetic. I just found him, I don't know, more this like not really comic relief character.
Yeah. I guess that's what they kind of mean, is they started introducing enough of the emotion stuff that it became even harder for him to be comic relief, but they also didn't pay that off in any way.
Yeah. And like they haven't set up Bad Batch to be a show that has a character like Toto acting as comic relief. Like, I could see them bringing in Hondo, sort of like kind of how Sid is almost this like ne'er-do-well, heart of gold kind of funny situation.
Oh, do you feel that way?
About Sid?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you not like Sid?
I definitely
not in
don't
that
Heart
way.
of Gold.
Yeah.
She's just in it for the money? Is that your...
I feel like Sid represents... The Bad Batch are definitely their own people, and they march to their own drummer. But to me, they're not scum and villainy yet. They are still, like, they believe that they are doing good, and they are fighting for good causes. And what I got is that part of their struggle is that they don't know what the good cause is anymore. To me, Sid represents, like, they could become scum and villainy. They could become bounty hunters and the like. But Sid being so clearly, not immoral, but amoral. Just like, I don't care what, if we're delivering babies to be, baby animals to be slaughtered, or, these things to people. I don't ask questions. I just take the check. So to me, I think she's quite funny, to be sure. But I thought she was this really wonderful, subtle representation for the Bad Batch of, like, this is the road you'd be going down. Do you want this?
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, I believe Sid would 100% betray the Bad Batch for the right price.
But, like, so would Hondo.
But Hondo often ended up doing the right thing.
Yeah, like Hondo would
Even
never
though
fully betray Ezra. Hondo often would sort of be grumpy about it, but also, he'd want to do the right. He would want to save our heroes and then steal something from our heroes to feel like he got paid for it.
Yeah, I guess. And I mean, like, we did sort of talk about how off character that episode where he, like, kidnapped a bunch of children and planned on murdering them was. But yeah, I guess, okay, I see where you're coming from. But I think my point is that Toto is none of these things. He's just like, he's pseudo-battle droid. In Clone Wars, he was that thing that you were talking about, Matthew, where he was just supposed to, like, be blown up and pratfall, and we were all supposed to laugh at him. And they've tried to bring that same attitude into Bad Batch, and I just don't think it fits here.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think this is kind of trying to be a mature... we don't have battle droids rogering all over the place. We don't have... This does feel like a more mature, more in-depth kind of, like, no one is 2D anymore. I mean, quite literally, but also in terms of, like, the animation being so much better. But also in terms of, like, characters aren't written so, like, one-dimensionally. So, yeah, I think that tracks.
Yeah, but I also, like, I mean, I think Cad Bane fit in perfectly wonderfully, especially with the whole, like, showdown shootout between him and Fennec Shand.
The Western music, that whole thing. Oh,
yes.
I more meant the other episode, but yeah, this one as well. It was just those little scenes of his hand, like, going closer and closer towards the blaster. It was just so well done.
Yeah, and, like,
this whole episode, the animation on the planet with that fog just creeping in everywhere was beautiful.
Yeah.
I was very, very impressed with the animation. I just was overall impressed with the episode. Like, it's funny. I think I have enjoyed the show. I feel like I enjoyed it a lot more earlier, and my excitement about it has faded a bit. In part because I really want the Tarkin story, and we're not getting it. And I think last episode I was so excited to get that. We didn't get any, like, Crosshair backstory. And I feel like I'm still very excited for this whole show to exist. But to me, it was fairly telling that it was Thursday night at about 1:30 a.m., which for me, Central Time, means that the Bad Batch was going to premiere in half an hour. And I was fairly tired, and I thought, you know what? I'll just go to bed. I can watch it later. And then Friday, I got pretty busy, and I kept thinking, like, oh, maybe I could make some time. No, I'll get around to watching the Bad Batch. And I thought it was kind of telling for me that like with Mandalorian, I would never have let an episode go that long. I would need to see it right now. And I think part of that's that, but also because I'm not seeing as much buzz about this show. Like, there are people talking about it, but, like, in our Stranded Panda chat group, we're not getting anywhere near as much discussion of it as we did about Mandalorian. And I hope people are watching the show, because I think it's very good, but I was feeling kind of a lull about it, and now I'm much more like, okay, I need to know what happens next,
Yeah, I guess like I feel similarly about not feeling as pressing a need to watch it. Like I think we've watched all of them Friday night. We watched one of them Friday morning.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, we've watched them all on Friday. But I haven't felt this like as soon as Riki's home from work, it's time to turn on the TV and watch Bad Batch. We usually like after dinner, we'll turn it on and watch in the evening. And like I guess we did the same thing with Mandalorian, but with Mandalorian I felt like I had to completely forego social media until I'd seen the episode of Mandalorian. Otherwise something was going to get spoiled for me. Whereas like Bad Batch, I'm freely trawling around on Facebook for most of the day.
It's funny, within the Stranded Panda group, we've actually imposed a pretty strict no spoilers, that you can't say anything. You have to nest any comments about spoilers for the first 48 hours after something comes out. And I sometimes forget that the rest of the internet's not like that, and so I'll be like, oh, I'm fine. And then someone else on a different thing spoils something. I'm like, but, oh no, you don't have the same spoiler warnings we do.
Well, Twitter is terrible for this. Because the trending bar on the side will just have full-on spoilers, like in a word or a name.
Right.
You know, like when Ahsoka Tano appeared on The Mandalorian Season 2. That was in the sidebars, like, and it was Friday, so I was like, oh, well, I guess this is the episode where Ahsoka is going to show up. Mm-hmm. This week was interesting because Boba Fett was trending. So I was actually expecting Boba Fett, but they only name Boba Fett. But we could still get Boba Fett, because one of the things that I was reading was that in season 7 of the Clone Wars, Dave Filoni had wanted to have a showdown where Boba Fett defeats Cad Bane and kind of establishes that he's the new best bounty hunter. Ooh. So I think we could get some kind of showdown like that. And establish, you know, the new Boba Fett legacy, because he needs something to become the Boba Fett that we know by Empire.
Yeah, like I think we're definitely seeing Boba Fett in this series. Yeah. In some way. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. I hadn't even thought of seeing Boba Fett, but yeah, that'll be certainly a thing. It's funny, now that I've taken a couple classes in like how to market podcasts and things like that, I've learned so much about like the way. Unfortunately, it's encouraged that people, like, if there's just a tiny sliver of a connection to a very popular hashtag, you put the hashtag in just to, like, get the extra hits, you know? So I've come to not pay attention to, like, what the trending hashtag is. But, yeah, I don't go on... if there's something I haven't seen yet that I don't want to get spoiled on, I just don't open up Twitter, which is too bad because I like the platform, but...
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's, like, I just barely use Twitter, so I'm not, like, worried about getting spoiled over there. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, like, and Facebook, too, most, like, my friends list is fairly limited, and I know that, like, if I were to be spoiled, it would be from, like, a news article or something like that.
Right.
Whereas Mandalorian, I thought that was, like, a very real chance. And, yeah, Bad Batch, I don't feel like that's as big a chance. And I wonder if it's because there's, like, just more episodes of it. Like, it's a more traditionally length television series, or what? Like, there's not as much of a sense of urgency as, like, every little detail matters, like with WandaVision or something like that.
Yeah, it's because the other shows, so The Mandalorian, but especially this year, WandaVision and Loki really play off of the whole J.J. Abrams mystery box type of TV show, where, like, they give you some hints at something, but then it's like, what does this mean? And, you know, everyone lost their minds over Mephisto theories during WandaVision. And so now there's been kind of a pullback of, like, let's not go too deep into all this. But there's still people out there talking about, you know, Kang the Conqueror on Loki, because we know that Kang's going to be a character in the MCU going forward soon. And this show is about time travel. So it's like, why not Kang?
And you know, this is something we've been talking about a lot on other episodes of this show. This is an episodic television show in a way that a lot of those others are. You know, that there's often this episode was more like a main plot, but like a lot of the episodes have really been like, you know, monster of the week, challenge of the week, while dealing with a little bit of the Uber plot. And I really enjoyed it, but I think you're right. I think that's also part of why I don't feel as much of a, like, I must know, because it's not... those mystery box things, it is a single story in 8 chapters in a way that this doesn't feel like it's quite that.
Yeah, and there's not like the sense of like, oh, Cad Bane's finger wiggled twice, and that's a reference to some obscure comic book where blah 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 blah.
Well, it's hard to have a mystery box with this show because there's no mystery. Like we know the end point. Yeah. We know what the Star Wars universe will look like 10 years from this. Right. So as you said earlier, Matthew, there can't be like this huge like galaxy shaking revelation because the galaxy didn't shake from this, or we would have heard about it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. Well, we've gone on for a little while. So I want to kind of wrap up. Is there any other last things about this episode or about the show in general that you all wanted to comment on that we haven't gotten to?
I did sort of want to briefly talk about the relationship between Hunter and Omega, especially at the end when they get reunited. But when she calls for the Bad Batch, Hondo has taken her to this planet. She's escaped, but he's still chasing her down. She activates the communicator and I think just says like, Hunter, I need you. Yeah. And then when they get back, I mean, Wrecker's the first one that she sees, but like she immediately goes and like hugs Hunter. And so I feel like they're really establishing this sort of like father-daughter kind of relationship, which is really nice to see. It's really cute and sweet.
I liked that a lot because the Wrecker connection with her was really nice and like made that episode where Wrecker turned for a few moments really powerful. But yeah, I didn't want it to feel like there's Wrecker and Omega and then the rest of the Bad Batch. And so seeing her like because she certainly was very excited to see Wrecker again. But also, having her that different relationship with him, I thought was so good. Yeah,
Wrecker's like the kooky older brother who she can like eat very expensive, not quite popcorn with, right? And like goof around with, and then Hunter's being developed as this paternal figure, and so I'm interested also to see like how her relationship builds with the other members of the batch as well.
Definitely. Well, folks, thank you so much. It's been so good to have you both back here. I know we're going to get started pretty soon. You're going through a move, so we're going to let you have some time to figure that out. But once you're back, we're going to start recording episodes on Rebels, which I'm really looking forward to. And, hopefully we'll get you back at least one more time for Bad Batch stuff. I just want to say thank you again so much for being a part of this. It was great to kind of get to hear your thoughts on this, and it just makes me all the more excited to dive into Rebels now.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having us.
Of course.
Thank you.
All right, and to all of our listeners, thank you all so much. We'd, as always, love to hear your thoughts. You can find us on Facebook or Twitter at The Ethical Panda. You can email us at theethicalpanda@gmail.com. We've been getting more emails. It's really great. We did a feedback episode for Ethical Panda. We'll do kind of feedback on Bad Batch as more comes in. Definitely find us there. I'm doing a lot more on stream now on twitch.tv at The Ethical Panda. One thing I'm doing is that I'm going to try to every Sunday night we're going to do the recording of Superhero Ethics at 8 p.m. Central on Twitch. So you'll still get it as a podcast, but you can watch it live and take part in the Twitch stream and ask questions and things like that, and participate live. And then it'll go into, I'm also doing poker streaming where I'll play some poker and talk about it, but also, talk about Loki or Star Wars or, whatever's the topic of the day. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. So Sunday nights at 8, not all the time, depending on scheduling, but at least hopefully half or 2/3 of the time will be the Superhero Ethics recording. And then Sundays at 9:30 Central, and also Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock Central, I'll be doing the poker where it's like poker and chatting about something else. So please check all that out. Please check out all the other podcasts. Check out all the other great podcasts on the Stranded Panda Podcast Network that we're a proud member of. And more than anything, have a great day.
Omega? I don't know.
There's no Kenobi.